This science fiction story begins by showcasing a very large event where scientists from across the country are invited and are being honored appropriately. Among them is a scientist named Seth, who, while talking, approaches a journalist named Veronica. Seth tells Veronica that he has something that, when showcased in her publishing company, will attract a lot of viewership. In other words, Seth wants to show Veronica one of his experiments, but for this, Veronica will have to go with him to the basement. Initially, Veronica is reluctant, but since she is a journalist and news is coming directly to her, why would she refuse? So, Veronica directly accompanies Seth to his house's basement. Upon reaching the basement, she sees several machines and 2 chambers connected to a computer. Seth then tells Veronica that these 2 machines are teleportation machines. If something is placed in one chamber, it teleports to the other chamber. This is the experiment he has been working on for years. However, when Veronica hears this concept for the first time, she finds it amusing. To present the truth to Veronica, Seth demonstrates the experiment. He takes a piece of fabric for Veronica to wear and places it inside one chamber. Going to the computer, he types some algorithms and opens it with his password. The entire process starts, and within a short time, the piece of fabric that was placed in one chamber teleports to the other chamber. Seeing this, Veronica is taken aback because the concept of teleportation has been a dream until now. How could Seth create this concept in this manner? Veronica records all her questions to Seth in a tape recorder because this is a significant news story that will elevate her news channel. But when Seth learns that Veronica has recorded everything, he tries to explain to her that she should not publish anything yet, as he wants to keep it a secret until his entire experiment is complete. But Veronica completely disagrees with this and directly starts to leave. She reaches her boss's office and shows him the entire recording. However, Veronica's boss does not want to invest in all this nonsense. He thinks these are just publicity stunts that Veronica is trying to use to grab attention. Therefore, Veronica's boss rejects her idea. A little while later, Seth arrives at Veronica's office and explains everything. He tells her that he has performed all the experiments perfectly, but they only apply to non-living things. He hasn't teleported any living beings yet, and he wants Veronica to keep everything a secret until he completes his experiment. If everyone finds out, it could put his life in danger. Veronica listens carefully to Seth, and then Seth says that he wants her to create a documentary about his entire experiment. She can record everything about his experiments, and if it becomes successful in a short time, she can publish it fully, which would benefit her greatly and give him the recognition he has always wanted as a great scientist. Veronica agrees to Seth's proposal, and they start spending time together, during which Seth focuses on his experiments. Seth's teleportation machine successfully teleports non-living things, but now he begins attempting to teleport living things. First, he takes a monkey into his teleportation machine and tries to teleport it. However, although the monkey does teleport, its entire body is destroyed upon arriving in the second chamber, meaning it died there. Seth becomes very disappointed and wonders if his experiment on living things will ever succeed. Because of this, he starts to feel a bit anxious, but Veronica encourages him, telling him not to lose hope. She motivates him to keep focusing on his experiments and try different things, assuring him that he will definitely find success one day. Now, as they spent time together, Seth and Veronica had grown closer, and they had fallen in love. One day, while working, Seth had an idea. He immediately placed a piece of meat inside the teleportation machine and started making some changes in the algorithm. After that, he turned on the teleportation machine, and the piece of meat was transferred directly from one chamber to the other, successfully and safely, without any issues. Seth was incredibly happy about this breakthrough, as he had figured out how to teleport living things. Veronica was recording all these developments and creating documentation of their experiments. The secret behind this success was that before teleporting any living thing, Seth would provide the system with information about its DNA and entire body structure. This way, even after teleportation, the system could prevent the complete deterioration of the DNA. After understanding this entire process, Seth placed another monkey inside the machine and immediately informed the system about its DNA and body structure before initiating the teleportation. After a short while, the monkey was successfully transferred to the second chamber, and surprisingly, it was completely safe. Its body's DNA structures were not deteriorated at all. This meant that his experiment on teleporting living things was working 100%. Veronica recorded all of this and continued with her documentation. However, she did not share these findings with her company. Meanwhile, Veronica's boss was keeping a close eye on everything, and without asking anyone, he published an article about Seth in the magazine. Veronica's boss had known from the beginning that Seth's experiment would work perfectly. He had deliberately told Veronica that he could not help her, which was because he had a relationship with Veronica in the past. He did not want Veronica and Seth to come together as a result of the documentation of this experiment, so he initially refused and then published the article about Seth's experiment in the magazine. Veronica was furious with her boss. Veronica began threatening her boss that she would go to the police if he didn't remove Seth's name from the magazine. On the other hand, when Seth learned about the relationship between Veronica and her boss, he became very angry. Veronica only stated that she didn't like that relationship at all, and it didn't last long, but now she was with him and would stay with him. However, Seth couldn't seem to shake off those thoughts. While pondering these matters, he drank heavily and went into his laboratory. In a moment of reckless curiosity, he decided to enter the teleportation machine himself to experience firsthand what it was like. Seth applied all his algorithms and, after stripping down, entered one of the chambers. Unbeknownst to him, a small fly had also entered the chamber with him. He activated the teleportation machine and was directly teleported to the second chamber. Seth seemed completely normal. A little while later, when Veronica came to him, she noticed that his body felt hot. Seth told her that he loved her very much and would always be with her. Veronica promised that she would never leave him. However, the next day, changes began to occur in Seth's body. These changes were undoubtedly due to the machine and how Seth had teleported himself. He had become stronger and more agile than before. Yet, Veronica still did not know the truth that Seth had included himself in the machine. Seth kept this a secret because he genuinely didn't know what would happen to him next. When Seth went out for coffee with Veronica, he added a lot of sugar. Veronica was surprised because Seth had never liked so much sugar before. She wondered why his behavior and preferences had suddenly changed. While Seth and Veronica were enjoying themselves in the laboratory, Veronica suddenly noticed that long hair was growing on Seth's body. When Veronica asked about it, Seth told her to ignore it, suggesting that he might have sustained some injury causing it. Despite Seth's denial, Veronica began to cut the hair, but it was so strong that even the scissors couldn't cut it. At that moment, Veronica started to suspect what was really happening with Seth. One night, while Seth was asleep, a fly buzzed around him, and he suddenly began to control the fly with his mind, capturing it effortlessly with his hand. He was moving so quickly that he couldn't believe it himself. After thinking about this, Seth finally decided to tell Veronica the truth. He had entered the teleportation machine and had successfully teleported back. Seth insisted that if she didn't believe him, she could try it herself, claiming that it felt amazing and might even upgrade their bodies. However, Veronica refused to believe Seth's claims, telling him he was insane. She pointed out that they still didn't know if the machine was safe for human experimentation, so he shouldn't tamper with it. Seth's behavior had become increasingly aggressive, and he spoke to Veronica in a very angry tone. In his rage, he left and went to a bar, where he picked up a woman, taking her home after giving her some money. Seth became intimate with the woman, enjoying himself, but then he started to pressure her to try the teleportation machine, promising to pay her double if she did. The woman felt uncomfortable with Seth's insistence, thinking he was a crazy scientist trying to involve her in his experiments. Shortly after, Veronica arrived at the scene. Seth, realizing this, apologized and told the woman to leave. Veronica began to reason with Seth again, urging him to regain control and emphasizing that sacrificing everything for an experiment was not a good idea. She then shocked him with a reality check about the long hair growing from his body. Veronica took Seth to the laboratory for a checkup. The results revealed that the hair didn't belong to any human. Instead, it contained the DNA of an insect. Seth insisted that Veronica was lying and accused her of manipulating him out of jealousy because he had developed extra abilities. Angered by her disbelief, he kicked Veronica out of the laboratory, telling her to leave. After that, Seth stopped going outside and continued his experiments. Days passed, and he hadn't seen Veronica during that time. Suddenly, Veronica received a call from Seth, who sounded distressed and said he needed her urgently. He asked her to come to his laboratory as soon as possible. Veronica thought Seth might want to apologize, so she went straight to the lab. However, when she saw Seth, she was shocked. His body was deteriorating, and his skin looked terrible. He didn't seem human at all. Seth explained his experience from a few days ago. He told her that he had checked the report from the day he teleported and discovered that a small fly had also entered the chamber with him. When he teleported, the machine merged his DNA with that of the fly, which was causing all the changes happening in his body. He explained that hair had started growing all over his body, even his fingernails had changed, and his teeth were breaking. Within a few days, his entire body began to resemble that of a dangerous creature, and he had no idea how to fix it. Veronica was completely shocked and couldn't believe her eyes. She was desperate to help Seth, so she went straight to her boss and explained everything, detailing how Seth was trapped in a dire situation. Seth had placed himself inside the teleportation machine, and due to a mistake, his DNA had merged with that of a fly. Now, all the changes happening in Seth's body were a result of that small fly. Although Veronica wanted to help Seth, he kept resisting her. Despite this, Veronica insisted repeatedly. Eventually, her boss agreed to find a solution but stated that he wouldn't go to see Seth because he hated him. Veronica felt a bit relieved that her boss was finally willing to help. As time went on, Seth began to develop extraordinary abilities similar to those of a fly, and they were gradually increasing. Veronica decided to call Seth down and started recording him to show her boss. Later, when her boss saw the recording, he was completely shocked. Seth's body had deteriorated so much that if he remained alive for a bit longer, he would turn into a creature. Her boss didn't think there was any way to save Seth. Meanwhile, Seth was still experimenting in his laboratory, trying to find a proper solution to what had happened to him. After hours of hard work, he finally discovered a solution. To revert back to human form, he would need to enter the teleportation machine with a healthy human. Only then could their DNA combine, allowing Seth to return to his original self. When Veronica arrived at Seth's lab, she was heartbroken by his condition. Just one day had passed, and Seth's state had worsened so much that his face was hardly recognizable. However, Veronica was there to tell him something important. She was pregnant, and the child was Seth's. But seeing his condition, she couldn't bring herself to tell him and ran away. Outside, Veronica met her boss, and she confided in him that she didn't want to have the baby because she feared it might be like Seth, an insect creature. Determined not to let another creature enter the world, Veronica decided to have an abortion. Her boss took her to the hospital for the procedure. Veronica explained everything to the doctor, stating that she wanted to have an abortion because she didn't want to bring any children into this world. Seth, who had developed insect-like abilities, could easily hear their conversation from a distance. When he learned that Veronica was pregnant, he jumped into the hospital and, in a rush of emotions, picked Veronica up and began to carry her away. Seth was very emotional and pleaded with Veronica, saying, "Please let our child come into this world." Veronica, feeling sad, replied, "I want to, but our son will be born an insect, and that's unacceptable. It's better for our child to be terminated." At that moment, Veronica's boss had arrived at the laboratory, concerned for her safety and wondering where Seth had taken her. He carried a gun with him, continuously searching for it. Suddenly, Seth jumped on him and began to attack. He was determined not to let anyone come between him and Veronica. With his newfound abilities, Seth was throwing punches rapidly and managed to injure Veronica's boss, leaving him unconscious on the floor. Veronica, who was caught in a precarious situation, tried to stop Seth. She held his face and urged him not to do this because it would make him a killer. However, Seth's mental state was deteriorating. As Veronica struggled to push him back, Seth's face suddenly twisted, and an odd creature emerged from within him, resembling a fly but in an upgraded version. Now fully transformed into a creature, Seth told Veronica, "Only you can fix me." He reminded her of the solution he had found. If he entered the teleportation machine with a healthy person, there was a chance he could return to normal. However, Veronica didn't trust this idea at all. She feared that if she participated, she might also end up transforming into a creature like Seth. But Seth was no longer requesting anything. He started to act forcefully. He grabbed Veronica and locked her inside a chamber. He quickly activated the machine and entered another chamber, which began processing. The good news was that Veronica's boss regained consciousness almost immediately. He picked up his gun and cut the wires to Veronica's chamber, managing to free her just in time. However, Seth, who was in his chamber, was unable to escape. This led to a short circuit, causing electrical shocks to surge through Seth's body, and he began to disintegrate. After a short while, when his chamber opened, Seth slowly emerged, indicating that there was still some life left in him. He then told Veronica, "Please end my life, I don't want to live anymore. This is my last wish." Veronica, despite not wanting to do this, understood that Seth could not be saved, and letting him die was the best solution. Thus, she drew her gun and shot Seth, who fell lifeless to the ground. Veronica then left the scene and began to live her life with her boss. This concludes our story.